Evening, everybody. Welcome to the Together Women Rise June webinar. I am Vicki Bush-Joseph, and I will be the moderator for tonight's event. I'm a new member of Rise's Board of Directors and the volunteer regional leader for the Midwest region. Before we get started, everybody knows this, but just a couple of Zoom reminders. Please keep yourself on mute while our speakers are presenting. There will be a Q&A after each speaker. Please enter your questions in the chat function. We'll do our best to get to as many questions as we can. This is a special milestone year for Together Women Rise. 2023 is our 20th anniversary. We began in Greenville, South Carolina, thanks to the amazing collaboration of our co-founders, Marshall Wallace and Barb Collins. Today, we are a powerful community of women and allies dedicated to achieving global gender equality. We have hundreds of local chapters across the United States where members learn about gender equality issues, give grants to organizations that support women and girls in low-income countries in the global South, and build community and connections with women around the world. I encourage you to visit our website at togetherwomenrise.org for more information and for ways to get involved. It's time now to turn to the first of tonight's speakers. Each month, Together Women Rise features a project that addresses one of the many challenges faced by women and girls in low-income countries. We award these projects a featured grant of between $35,000 and $50,000, and together at this monthly webinar and at chapters all across the United States, we learn about the country, about the challenges, and about how the project will help women and girls and global gender equality. This month, we are partnering with Educate2Envision. This project will address the key issues preventing girls' full participation in their rural communities, including pervasive machismo culture, lack of female role models, and an ill-equipped education system that fails to connect girls to future income-generating opportunities. First, we're going to play a short video about the project, and then I will introduce our guest speaker from Educate2Envision. Suzanne, we're not hearing the sound.
Para las niñas que sigan estudiando, tengan apoyo de nuestros padres, para tener un mejor futuro. Gracias. Estoy estudiando para salir. Y sobre todo que disfruten cada van a ser una buena persona, van a tener la capacidad de ayudar a los demás, van a ser una agente de cambio positivo para ayudar a otras niñas y así cambiar que ya no haya más corrupción y con más educación lo podemos lograr. Seamos esos agentes de cambiar nuestra realidad, que podemos cambiar nuestro mundo y también para que seamos ese granito de arena que puede ayudar a nuestra comunidad y a nuestra sociedad a seguir adelante. Mi consejo para el día de hoy, chicas, es que seamos siempre positivos porque yo sé que lo podemos lograr.
Beneficiado de la forma de que ahora ya no lo compro las cosas que yo tengo exactamente. Ya no compro la cebolla, lo doy gracias a Dios, porque lo que es la fundación nos ha venido apoyando con las semillas. Me siento alegre porque ahora ya no tengo que ir a comprar los productos al mercado y he aprendido a cómo sembrarlos.
Felicitar, ¿verdad?, a los estudiantes graduandos. Chicos, ustedes pueden. No importa cuántas dificultades se presenten en el camino, no importan las críticas de las demás personas, ustedes pueden. Sigan adelante, chicos, que esa es un escalón más. Lo que ustedes están cumpliendo hoy, bueno, es una meta más. sigan adelante, lo mejor está por venir, pongan mucho de su empeño.
Buenas tardes. Primeramente le damos gracias a Dios porque Él nos dio la oportunidad de estar aquí. Le quiero dar gracias a la fundación porque ella nos apoyó en estos 3 años y aprendimos muchas cosas. También le quiero dar gracias a todos los maestros que me enseñaron cosas desde que estaba en kinder y he llegado hasta aquí.
Este es uno de los logros. Estoy segura que vamos a llegar muy lejos y a luchar. El único que nos puede detener somos nosotros y espero que tengamos la fuerza para seguir adelante. Gracias. Buenas tardes, que lo voy a lograr. También a los compañeros que me ayudaron. Éxitos, esto no termina aquí, vamos por más. Este solo es un paso más a la educación. Yo sé que si lo podemos, si lo intentamos, podemos. Mientras no intentemos algo, no digamos no puedo. Así que les animo a mis compañeros a seguir adelante.
Okay. Always so inspiring, the videos. Tonight, we are pleased to have with us Katya Gomez, founder and executive director of Educate2Envision. At the age of 21, Katya served as one of the youngest district chairs for CARE USA, speaking to politicians in Washington, D.C. and locally about the importance of empowering women and girls to conquer global poverty. She founded the nonprofit organization Educate2Envision International in her final year of university to address the immense disparities in access to quality education for rural Honduran girls. The following year, she was listed by Newsweek as one of the top 25 women under 25 in the world to watch, and awarded the Do Something Award, honoring the top young change makers in the United States and Canada. Katya is a former Ashoka Global Fellow, a network of social entrepreneurs working on innovative solutions to poverty. Katya earned her Master's of Global Public Health from Boston University and her BA in International Studies from the University of California, San Diego. To date, Educate2Envision International has started 17 secondary schools and provides scholarships and leadership training to over 1,000 students in the most remote parts of Honduras. Welcome, Katya.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure and joy to be here with all of you this evening. Thank you all. Thank you, Vicki, everyone, for having me and for this great opportunity. You know, I want to just start by, before I talk about E2E, the girls that you saw in those videos, I have to tell you, you know, that was their high school graduation speech, but I have known them since they were in 6th grade. And I can tell you, when I first met them, not a single word would come out of their mouths. They were the shyest, most introverted girls that you can ever meet, and which is typical of rural Honduran communities, to the point that one of the girls in the video would cry all the time when she had to speak in public. And to see her in that video 5 years later, it's just a world of a difference and speaks to the power of education. So I just wanted to share that as well. So when I like to speak about E2E, I like to try and find this, this point of shared humanity to try and really bridge that gap between a cause that is thousands and thousands of miles away from us, and really try and connect to where you are in your homes right now, so you can really feel and understand what this mission is. So the point of shared humanity is one that might not be too obvious, but it starts with a cup of coffee. And I wonder how many of you watching right now had a cup of coffee this morning, or have that as your ritual, and how many of you, really link where that coffee comes from with access to education. They don't really seem too obvious there. But Honduras is actually the 6th largest exporter of coffee in the world and the 3rd largest in Latin America. So there's a good chance whatever coffee you had this morning might have had some Honduras in it and might have even come from one of the communities where these girls live. There's a good possibility of that. So I want you all, if you can, and I feel like this is a really well-traveled group of women here, if you can imagine a coffee community. And imagine, look around, what do you see? Who do you see? What do the roads look like? Is there a hospital? Is there a school? What are the people like? So I think most people, when they imagine a coffee community, can see the pristine green mountains, they can see the rainforest, they can see the beauty that surrounds all of these coffee farms. And that is all very true. The other side of it is, as you can imagine, how remote these coffee communities are. Imagine how you arrive to the top of that mountain where the best coffee in the world grows. Imagine what it takes to cross the rivers in a rainy season where there's mud all over the place, where there's no public transportation, where you're just trying to trudge through unlit roads just to get to your home. So coffee communities are some of the most beautiful places in the world. But as I mentioned, they are some of the most difficult to deliver education to. And this is not only in Honduras, this is in all over the world. So the children who live in these communities are struggling to be seen and to be heard. So where we work, there is no government intervention. Very infrequently are there other NGOs or other aid groups that will come in just because of the level of difficulty to access these areas. So as you can imagine, the young people, including the ones that you see there, are often very forgotten about. And that is part of the reason that less than 30% of young people will ever go beyond 6th grade, will ever see a classroom again after they're 12 years old. That's the end of their education road. And I want to tell you a little bit about how I found this out, what brought me to Honduras. And I think that some of you can maybe relate, because I feel like we're all change makers here. And so I can tell you that I arrived in Honduras as Vicky mentioned, as a senior in university. And we were there for 1 week to work on a water and sanitation project. We were going to build what is called a pila. And a pila is essentially a water storage facility with bricks laid on top of one another in a square shape. And that's where a lot of the families store their water in rural areas. So we were there, we were mixing cement, my classmates and I, and there was a girl whose home, she was the neighbor of the home we were building the pilaf for. And she would just always come every morning like clockwork and just sit there. She was about 10 years old, sit and observe and watch us. And just watch us every time, not say a word, nothing at all, but it would just sit and watch us. And as time went by, I wanted to know more about her. And so I found out later, as I returned home actually, that she had dropped out when she was in 3rd grade to help her grandmother make tortillas, which was the only source of income that they had. And there was no real hope for her after she had dropped out. This was the path in the future that she had in front of her. So there were a couple of things there. One was, as I mentioned, her watching us do this work and try and help and promote water and sanitation. The fact that she was a passive bystander in this moment where there's people coming to try and improve the lives of those in the community. I felt that no girl should be a passive bystander when it comes to defeating poverty, when it comes to their own community's development, their own personal development. And that was one thing that stood out, is that I never wanted to see that. I wanted to see the young people in this community taking matters into their own hands, because the talent and the potential was there. It was just bypassed. It was overseen and overlooked. And the other thing is that I had, during my breaks from mixing cement, I was able to go out in the community and really ask questions. I wanted to learn more about why there were so many young children, little small children around that were very curious and watching us, but I didn't see many teenagers, many adolescents. And so when I would ask that question about, is there anyone that I could interview or speak with? I'm really curious about what the teenagers are doing. Can I speak to a secondary school student? The response that I got from the director of the school and the community was, there's nobody for you to talk to. Nobody here has ever gone to secondary school. That doesn't happen. And so for me, that was another eye-opening elephant in the room. I felt, that nobody was talking about this issue, that in this community of over maybe 1,000 people, no one had ever gone beyond 6th grade. So that for me was something that I held on to so tightly, as well as my experience with the young girl who I would eventually sponsor and get back into school. So all of that combined was really the impetus and the catalyst for Educate2Envision. So that sort of segues into where RISE comes in to this project that we're now going to start working on as of next month. And so this is something I also want to applaud all of you for, is spotlighting Honduras, which I know has a very negative connotation attached to the country, unfortunately, and is also oftentimes not included in a lot of conversations. And so I thank all of you for giving Honduras a chance, for believing in the young people of Honduras, and for not overlooking the students that you saw in the video, who often, as I mentioned, do feel quite invisible. So the project that we're working on with together with all of your support is really this 3-pronged approach to that lack of access to secondary school in the most remote parts of the country. So when we go in as an organization to a community that has never before had access, this is something that is obviously life-changing, but it's also setting this brand new precedent. So many of the students that you saw in the video are quite literally the very first to try this, to try to get to another education level. No one has ever done it. I think all of us can relate to, when have you been the first to do something in your group of friends or in your family, to travel, maybe the first to leave the country, or the first to try something new? It's really scary. It's something that's very uncertain. The results are not guaranteed, especially when, as is the case in these rural communities, that there is a lot of negative noise around you. There is a lot of, how dare she think that she can go on to secondary school? Nobody has ever done that before. The audacity of this girl to think that she is intelligent enough to do something that none of us have ever done before. It's very bold, it's very brave, it's scary. And you feel very alone and isolated. And these are things that I am recalling from conversations from the girls themselves, where they have been so close to dropping out because it's often overwhelming the amount of negative criticism that comes from the older adults in the community. And so the idea of taking education, secondary school access, but making it so that it's not only about being good at math and being good at reading, but looking at this incredible tool that you now have, which is the most highly educated people in the community are these girls. And so you take that and you use that as the conduit to tackle the other types of poverty that exist in the community. So as you can imagine, in a rural community, it's not only lack of access to education, it's malnutrition, it's lack of access to clean water, it's adolescent pregnancy, it's adult illiteracy. There's so many other factors floating around education. So E2E's model is taking secondary school students, these change makers, these trailblazers, and equipping them with the knowledge and skill sets that any other NGO would have, which is how to identify and assess needs in my community. How do I create a low-cost intervention, a project to try and tackle poverty in my community, and then go out and accomplish that and do it and become a girl who's not only known as a mother and a caretaker, but now I'm solving the water crisis, or now I'm teaching adults how to read and write. And so we are coupling education with leadership. And this project with RISE is allowing us to do that for over 100 additional girls. and seeing them take on this new role, which is undoubtedly going to inspire that next generation of sixth grade graduates when they see for the first time these female role models who are not only sweeping outside or washing dishes, but they are actively participating in the community's development. So that's number one. And then the second one is the strategy that we have working with the mothers, because of course we're breaking these societal and cultural norms that show that women are not only confined to the home anymore. And now that's not the only pathway that exists for them. And so we work with mothers through the Garden Project, as you saw there, which is really where, you know, they are unfortunately confined to the community because they do have many children, a lot of these mothers. So we meet them where they are. And through this Garden Project, they're able to not have to deal with how do I transport myself to somewhere else where a workshop is taking place, but rather in my own backyard, I now have access to this training on how to grow my own fruits and vegetables. So one, the household income is increased and mothers are able to now worry less about how do I afford my daughter's education. But secondarily, it's really a matter of gaining a skill set that was never there previously, and having mothers create another identity and empower them to see themselves as much more, because their daughters are growing, their daughters are evolving, their mentality is evolving. And sometimes the mothers aren't really sure what to do with that. So it's allowing them to participate in this Garden Project as a group of mothers who are all seeing their daughters achieve these new goals together. And so it creates that space of community. Well, let's all support these young girls. Let's all, you know, try and help them overcome that negative noise that is surrounding them. So that was the second one. And then lastly, so this is a three-pronged approach. The third is, as E2E has been now around for over 10 years, we're reaching our 11th year now, we have increasing numbers of secondary school graduates, which has always been the goal since day one, is to see students make it to the very end. And so for us, we are creating now this, this secondary school support system. So it's essentially allowing students to, when they graduate, be able to have a place to come and to develop their entrepreneurial skills, or to study for university exams, everything free of charge. So create this sort of guidance counseling that you typically we'll call it here in the US, because that is non-existent in Honduras, especially in rural Honduras. So it's allowing E2E to really close that gap from the day that students arrive to our school in 7th grade to the day that they exit, and they still need some type of support to navigate what does the labor market look like? How do I even begin to identify my own skill set so I know which path to take? Whether it's university, it might not be, it might be starting my own business, it might be learning a trade, whatever it might be. I know that E2E can direct me to the right resources, can help me find scholarships, can help me to make sure that those 5 years of my time, my investment, my sacrifice pays off in the end. And there's really not that feeling of abandonment at the end. And so that's very important for us, that the girls still continue, even 5 years later, to be able to return and ask questions or ask for guidance. And we have that support available to them. So I'm not sure how much time I have left, Vicki.
You're doing well. Just a quick reminder for people to put your questions in the chat, and we do have a couple of questions. But was there something else that you wanted to add, Katya, at this point, or do you should we start with our? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to share one last story of one of our graduates. Is it okay to share?
Please. That was going to be my question, so please.
Okay. It looks like I don't have access to the screen share, but...
Oh, we can give it to you.
Okay, wonderful.
Yep. Suzanne, can you open that up for Katya? Hopefully it's coming. All right, cool.
So this was just one story that I wanted to share with you very briefly. And so this is Sabi. And Sabi I met, again, as all of the girls, when she was just entering 7th grade. And Sabi is just another incredible example of the types of girls that this project will support. So she was essentially the breadwinner of her family at the age of 17. And she had decided to move to the city to work as essentially a maid in a wealthier family's home, traveling back and forth to be able to earn money for her family. And she many times had that conversation with herself that I can't do this anymore. I can't continue to try and push through this, to work and to study and to believe that I can actually do this. And so we've had many conversations over the years. Her goal has always been to become a nurse, always has just been fascinated by nursing. And she, unfortunately, a couple years ago, her father became very ill. And I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the public healthcare system in Honduras, but unfortunately, the public hospitals that are affordable are ones where you actually have to bring your own supplies to your own surgery. You have to bring the tools to your own surgery and purchase that and bring it to the doctor so that they can do the operation. And everything is purchased on your own. So these hospitals are I mean, you can just imagine nobody wants to even go there, even if you're as sick as you can be. But her father was very ill, and she, being the most educated person in the household, was able to advocate for her father the entire time in this really messed up system, in this convoluted, terrible healthcare system. She was there night and day, advocating, making sure that she knew exactly the type of medicines and just the ability of this young teenage girl to enter this chaotic healthcare system and try and make sure that her parents are okay, because they have maybe a second grade education. I can't recall right at this moment, but she, being the educated woman that she is, was able to really help and be there for her family. And so I'm proud that we were able to support her in achieving her goal. She is a nurse now. She's also, she just completed this year her nursing degree, and it was not easy. Not one step of the way, not one step of the way. There was always something, there was so much doubt. And she was one of the girls who also was just exposed to all the negative criticisms in the world. But this is the type of talent and grit that these girls are made of. And I think that that's just something that I am really proud and happy, and so happy that RISE is helping to identify these girls, to, as I kind of say, to take off the invisibility cloak that has been just shrouded around these communities. These are students who have felt invisible for so long, but just imagine if this is just one example of a girl who can beat the odds and end up creating a change in her family, for herself, and actually achieve this huge ambitious goal that she had as a young girl. How many others can we do this for? So that's what I wanted to leave you off with. Thank you, Vic.
No, that's fabulous. Thanks, Katya. That was actually my question was, can you give us a success story? And that one was perfect. So we do have time for a few questions, and our new communications person, Suzanne Metcalf, is going to help me with some of the questions out of the chat. So Suzanne, would you go ahead for us?
Sure. So how do you find staff for the schools and the leadership training?
Sure. So the majority of our teachers are people that are recommended to us from the parents in the community. So our model really hones in on finding local talent and being able to invest in local talent. So whether or not they're trained teachers, they will come to us and we will train them if they haven't received a teaching degree, because that is such an influential factor if the teacher can be from the community and not have to rely on someone to come in from the city, which is going to be very infrequent and also dangerous for someone to travel that far. So in some cases, our teachers are even alumni of our own program, which is always the most ideal situation. So that's usually how it works. If they're not alumni because we haven't been there long enough, they're always someone who's recommended from the parents and who they've agreed upon as a group is someone that they trust and would then be trained with us to become the teacher.
Great, thanks. And Another question is, how are the girls selected for the school?
Sure. So we have a fairly open door policy. So we welcome as many girls as possible who dare to, try and become educated. So we really encourage as many girls as possible to join our school. So we do, of course, have a process where we'll go and meet with the families and see, who the parents are, what their situation is, because we do offer full scholarships for girls who come from more desperate situations, single parents, or they're raised by their grandmothers. So we do get to know them, but overall, we do have the open door policy where we're trying to really invite as many girls as possible.
Great, thanks. And I think that's all we have time for right now. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And I'm going to pass it back to you, Vicki.
Yeah, it's back to me. I did see one of the questions about boys and men, and that is actually a good segue to our next speaker, but who is going to be addressing that in a different program. But thank you, Katya. So inspiring, and Together Women Rise is certainly pleased to support the important work of Educate2Envision. Thank you for sharing the success stories and the background and the pictures. And I love your putting us in the moment for when we have our cup of coffee tomorrow. we'll be thinking about the communities that you're working in. So thanks. Our next speaker this evening is from Equimundo, one of our new transformation partners. As you may remember, late last year, our board of directors approved a historic investment to create systemic change for women and girls, and Equimundo is an important part of this investment. Together Women Rise has awarded a grant to Equimundo in the amount of $100,000 per year for 2 years as part of our transformation partnerships. These partnerships are designed to address the root causes of global gender equality, including the social and cultural norms, beliefs, practices, and laws that prevent women from equal access to resources, to decision-making power, and to opportunity. We know that achieving gender equality will require significant changes in social norms. To achieve these changes in social norms, we cannot just work with women. We must work with men as well. Equimundo is the premier global organization working to engage men and boys as allies in gender equality, to promote healthy manhood, and to prevent violence. With this partnership, our Together Women Rise community will be part of a movement that engages men and boys to be equal partners in the care economy, assists men and boys to live out diverse, equitable, and healthy masculinities, and prevents gender-based violence. We're very pleased to have Melissa Wong Oviedo, Senior Programs Officer with Equimundo, with us tonight. Melissa is responsible for the management and technical oversight of the organization's projects and initiatives internationally, with a focus on the Latin American and Caribbean regions. Melissa is joining us tonight from Arequipa in Peru. Melissa has extensive experience working on the prevention of violence against women and children, women's economic empowerment, and the promotion and defense of women's human rights. She has worked for international organizations such as Plan International Peru and Innovations for Poverty Action, and has worked closely with grassroots organizations and rural and indigenous men, women, and young people in Latin America. Melissa has a bachelor's in science and psychology and a master's in research in education and social justice from Lancaster University in the UK. So we welcome Melissa. And then I also want to welcome Scott Osborne, who is a volunteer with Together Women Rise's Transformation Partnerships Committee. Scott will facilitate our conversation with Beth as we all learn together about the work that Equimundo is doing to create systems change for women. So thank you, Scott and Melissa, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Vicki, and welcome, Melissa.
Thank you, Vicki. Thank you, Scott.
So let's get started. I first knew you as Promundo, but now you're Equimundo. Take us back a little bit to how you folks got started and just quickly what your mission is.
Yeah, so first of all, I wanted to thank you and thank everyone at Together Women Rise for this invitation and for giving us the opportunity to share what we're doing with everyone, with all of your members. So Equimundo, before you may have known us as Promundo, that used to be our name up to last year. And Promundo was born, it was founded over 30 years ago in Brazil by our founder and CEO, Gary Barker, when he was doing research in the favelas in Brazil, working with young men who were involved in crime, who were involved in gangs, who were involved in violence. And he began to research why some of these men rejected these ways of being, these livelihoods that were very violent. And a lot of the answers that came were related to their wanting to care for their children and to care for their partners and to care for their older family members. And I think he began to question, why do some men decide to choose this? And how does this motivating way of thinking, how does care motivate men to change? So building onto that research, we have done a lot more work on understanding men, understanding their attitudes, understanding why and how men have become the number one aggressors, the number one number one people who commit violence against women, who commit violence against other men. So that is the story from many years ago in Brazil. And last year we changed our name from Promundo US to Equimundo, Center of Masculinities and Social Justice, with this mission to reaffirm that our goal is to promote equality and equity within a social justice framework, and also to work with masculinities for gender equality. We aren't in the game of working on masculinities and promoting men's rights. We're here to promote gender equality. We're here to work for social justice and gender justice. So what is our vision as an organization? It really is to find a world, find ways of being that men and women can be together in non-violent, caring relationships where power relations are equal, where men and women have access to resources, to opportunities, where there is no hierarchy between the sexes, and where we can also live in peace and harmony and loving relationships with others and, gender diverse people as well, because it isn't just men and women. So that's what we're trying to achieve through our work.
So let's stick with the attitudes of men and boys for just a minute. You folks have done a lot of research all over the globe, including with some of our other transformation partners. What really stands out? What do you think our audience would really like to hear that you've uncovered about some of these attitudes and practices? What are men telling you?
Yeah, so we have done a lot of research and there's lots of thematic areas that come to mind. But we've recently, last year, we did a summary of our research that we have conducted over 15 years. And this is the Images work, the International Men and Gender Equality Survey that we co-created with RCRW about 15 years ago. So this survey is a list of questions for men and for women to fill out on different topics, just to gain, their thoughts, their attitudes, their feelings in relation to gender equality, in relation to sexual and reproductive health and rights, gender roles within the household, fatherhoods, and also violence. And we've applied to this survey with local partners in different countries, in around 32 countries, and we've managed to get data from around 67,000 people over the 15 years. And a summary of an analysis of all of this data has given us, we call it the 15 headlines, but I'm only going to mention a couple of them here that I think are very related to the improvement of or the advance of women's rights. And it's that there's definitely a clear, so we assume that there are clear gender roles that people hold and believe, but this was confirmed by the research and in all of the countries. For example, men and women, mostly men, don't accept that the role of a man is to bathe their children. It's very unlikely for men to hold the belief that it's okay for them to do household work. And then more interesting, what we have found in the data is that there is an intergenerational transmission of gender roles. So when we ask men about what they saw in their home and the role of their fathers in their home, and then what they do in the home themselves, we saw correlation of men who hadn't seen a male caregiver or a male role model in the home do housework like cooking, cleaning, washing clothes. They themselves are less likely to report doing those chores at home. So there is that link. And in some countries, we even saw this link double. So it's, to us, this indicates that the important role of men teaching younger generations of men how to be and the caregiving responsibilities in the home, as well as the gender roles. And then more importantly, when it comes to violence, what we also saw, and a lot more research has also supported this, is that men who witness violence as children are statistically more likely to commit violence in their adult relationships. And this just gives us, again, this importance of, if we're trying to prevent violence, we need to start working with these male role models who have influence over our children's lives. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight those. We have many questions, so those key findings.
Sure. So it sounds like role models are one of your ways of bringing about this change, but these really are like social norms and cultural attitudes, which many people feel can be very, very hard to change. But I know you folks believe you can, and you have ways of doing that. How do you approach that? That's a very interesting topic.
Yeah, so we focus our work on research, programs, and advocacy. That is how our organization is structured. And when it comes to programs, I'm in the programs team. And what we do is we begin with the research. So we know that men want to be caregivers. They just don't know how. So we start to design our programs by speaking to them. What motivates them? What are also the structural challenges and barriers that limit their ability to be caregivers? For many men, especially in low-income countries, and especially vulnerable and marginalized men, we know that they are working in informal work. They have the perception that they are the main providers for the home, and they are out on the street collecting recycling material, doing anything that they can. And that is a structural barrier because they don't have time to be at home with their children. And when we speak to the man, what they tell us is, I would love to be at home, but I simply can't because of this provider role. Otherwise, they won't be able to meet their provider role and bring food to the table. So they have these limitations. So when we design the programs, we try to get them hooked. We try to find those hooks that appeal to men and their motivations. We also work on the social norms. Like you mentioned, when you work on social norms, you're not just working with the individual person and their attitudes. Social norms are collectively constructed. They are collective societal expectations of men and women, what we should be. So we try to focus our programs to go beyond that one-to-one work, but also on the collective messaging that men are receiving And through this, we work on the relational aspects. So we also work with women. Many of our programs are designed for men, for women, together and separate as well. We also try to engage with local campaigns, local community work, as well as with some leaders who are really sending out these messages at that local community level, and also through the advocacy work that we try to push for these structural changes so that we can promote more equitable, we try to promote the value of care work that right now it's undervalued and it sort of seems it should be unpaid, and it should be women who do this. But there is so much value in care work, but it's also a responsibility of men to do this work. So that is what we're trying to do at the bigger structural level, trying to promote these care economies, and that this should also include men. When it comes to our work as well, we focus at Equimundo, we have different approaches that we apply to all of our programming. And these are a feminist approach. It's also a human rights approach and intersectional approach, because it may complicate the design of our programs and it is difficult trying to work and consider everything. But if we don't consider these things, we're simply replicating existing injustices that are, prevalent in the communities where we live and in the countries where we work. So working through a feminist approach for us, it means also in our research, speaking to women and speaking to the partners of the men, what are their needs? What are the issues that they identify in the home? Because we can't only speak to men and create a program just for men. It's about promoting gender equality and preventing violence. So in a nutshell, that's roughly what we do and how we try to promote change.
So stick with women again. Together Women Rise focuses on gender equality and improving the well-being of women and girls. So help us connect the dots how these programs, which work directly with men and boys, really are improving the lives of women and girls. We know they are, but just help us think that through.
Yeah, absolutely. So for a long time, men and boys have been excluded from the conversation of preventing violence. I think the effort was made on re-educating aggressors. But now we have seen a shift that it's been recognized the important work of working with the men, working with the potential aggressors, working with the other side of the coin, whilst we definitely need to continue to work with organizations that are focusing on women's empowerment. There's so many resources and barriers that women still haven't been given access to. So we need to do all of that work, but at the same time, working with men, it's also another solution because men often hold those seats of power. It's when you look at who makes the decisions, who makes the politics, who makes the normatives in the local level, who gives or assigns budgets for local projects, often enough it's men. So if we don't reach out to them and we don't explain to them in a language that they understand, and it's not in an attacking manner, we can create change. Because also the patriarchal system and gender inequality isn't serving men as well. We have found from the research that we've done on men that there is currently it's called a crisis of manhood. There are many men who are, the suicidal rates among men are triple as higher than women. Men aren't happy. Our recent report on the state of American men found that 40% of men show depressive symptoms. 44% of them had thoughts of suicide in the last 2 weeks since filling out the survey. We all have 40% of men do not trust anyone, do not have one person that is close to them. So there is a lack of connection currently happening among men, and the gender norms limit their ability to develop these close relationships. What we see from men or even children when they're growing up at preschool, maybe 3 to 6 years old, young children, boys are receiving hugs, are receiving kisses, they're receiving affection. But as soon as they reach primary school, there is a sense of, no, don't touch them. And even if boys want to hug each other, it's frowned upon. And especially if you're looking at the adolescent age or university or adult men who are hugging each other, who are showing each other affection, or who have a close person to talk to, they're seen as gay. And all of this stigma with homophobia comes, and often men are limited in what they can do. So promoting gender equality, we believe, will definitely promote better rights and access to resources for women, but it would also benefit men.
So tell us a little bit more about just maybe one of your success stories, one of your programs that really stands out.
Yeah, so about, I think, 15 to 20 years ago, based on the research in Brazil, we created Program P, which is our flagship program that promotes more caring, nonviolent, present, connected, affectionate fatherhoods of men in different life stages, from young to older men. This program has been implemented in over 23 countries, always adapted with local partners and contextually made relevant to the needs of the local population. So we don't have one Program P that is the same to the other. But what we have found is that this program has helped to shift these narratives around what does it mean to be a father and their role in the caregiving tasks, especially with their children, but also the housework chores and also the reduction of violence. One of those cases that I can highlight is the implementation of Program P in Rwanda, where we conducted in 2015 an RCT. There was a baseline 9 months after the intervention and also 21 months after the intervention. And what we found in those RCT results were reduced reporting by women of experiencing intimate partner violence. We also found increased couple communication in family planning. We found increased involvement of women in decision-making, improvement in maternal health, increased partner participation of men in care work, and reduced violence against children. And then later on, in 2021, so 76 months after the intervention, we went back to those couples and surveyed the men and the women in another RCT. So we went back to the control group and the intervention group that had participated in the program. And we found sustained reduced reports of physical, sexual, and emotional and economic violence, also increased male participation in housework, less support of men, less support in men and women's reports that men have the last word in decision-making in the home, and also that men and women use less violence against children. So those reports for us show promising results that when you work with men in these programs, you have this sort of butterfly effect, because you raise that consciousness and that reflection in the men and in the relationships that they're having and the value that they're giving to their close members of family, to the important people, their children, their partners, their family. And it doesn't just promote more equitable, decision-making. It doesn't make them more progressive, but you can see the tangible effects in their relationship with their partner. And you can see that women are also reporting and affirming the changes that we are finding with men.
Thank you. I love your research-based approach. I really feel like you can tell when something is working. It's just great. Suzanne, I'm sure there are some questions. Do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, sure. I think we have time for at least one question. Do you find that working with boys and girls in schools to change norms is useful, or does it need to all be focused on adult men?
Absolutely. So last year, we launched the Global Boyhood Initiative, and this is focusing on younger generations, on just on this social gender socialization stage. So preschool, primary school, secondary school, because we have done a lot of work with adult men and it has worked. It is difficult. There are some changes, but we now want to focus a lot more on the younger generation. So instead of changing and shifting the way that men think about manhood and their being, we want to create these spaces and the ecosystems where boys and girls are being raised, but they should be raised with the concepts of gender equality and more healthy forms or ways of being masculine or what they think about masculinity. So we do think that it's important working with children. We need to work directly with children, but also the adults in the children's lives who create these environments and who constantly reinforce the social norms that we currently hear. So what we're currently doing with the Global Boyhood Initiative is working with teachers, working with parents, working with systems, and also the media has a large influence in how boys and girls are receiving these messages around masculinity and femininity and the way that both would relate. So we work with the adults in the children's lives and provide them tools to work with the children so that they can promote more connected masculinities, non-violent masculinities, and also give children the spaces for them to develop the skills. When it comes to boys, boys are often denied the chance to develop the skills to emotionally regulate themselves, to communicate their anger, their fears through a non-violent way. So this is what we want to promote. These spaces for them to develop skills that in the future will serve them to become non-violent and connected and caring men.
Thank you. Another question is, can you describe the structure of one of your programs and how you get the men and boys to participate?
The recruitment of men and boys is very difficult, especially men who are outside of the school system. One of the ways that we have found recently, we're trying to keep up with innovation and the change in the way that people behave. So we have conducted some formative research with human-centered design approaches. And what they have told us, this is in a project in Colombia, where we're adapting the program P that I described to the context in Colombia with very marginalized populations. And human-centered design methodology speaks directly with men. They don't just come back, hold the information, we create the program and we test it, but it's, all right, you've told me that what would motivate you to participate in this session is if we did practical activities with your children. Okay, and we're going to do this in a poster. We're going to show it to you. Does this communicate that message to you? And the men give them direct feedback and say, yes, this does, or no, it doesn't, or this poster looks really boring. I wouldn't show up to the session with this. And it's a very iterative process where you constantly getting feedback from the men themselves. And in this way, you're able to gauge their preferences, their behavior, and their motivation. So this process in Colombia with this program P that we're currently devising also led us to change the structure of the program. So that was part of this question, what is the structure? They're usually group educational classes or sessions. Our methodology is very participatory. It's always building on the person, our reflections, our lived experiences, and you part from that lived experience, usually the thought of pain. Usually many men have suffered violence. So it's connecting with that. What would they have wanted their father to do when they were children? And then creating those narratives and those reflections to say, all right, this is the opportunity you have to be a better father. Often these spaces aren't given for people to critically reflect upon their lives and who they want to be. So this is what the program does, or most of our programming does. And our new adaptation for Colombia is changing these group of educational sessions because we know men don't have time to attend in-person sessions. So we're reducing our program and we're actually making it hybrid through a WhatsApp group. Is it possible to engage in this reflection and critical thinking through a WhatsApp group of men? Also giving them a space to have peers. We know that men are lonely. We know that men often don't seek help when they need it. So does this work? It's something we're testing now, but recruitment of male participants is one of the biggest challenges that we do have, but we're trying to find solutions for it.
Wow. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us tonight and explaining to us a little bit more about Equimundo's work. And Scott, thank you for facilitating this conversation. I know from some of the questions in the chat and just what's going through my own mind that a lot of us still have a lot of questions, but I want to encourage everybody to go to our website. We do have information about our featured grantees on togetherwomenrise.org and also about our transformational partnerships. So, and of course, you can look directly at the websites for Equimundo and for E2E from the featured from tonight. So as we wrap up, let me just remind you that our work does depend on your donations to fund projects like the ones that you learned about tonight, as well as all of our education and engagement activities. So please visit our website to support the mission, togetherwomenrise.org. And tying in with Melissa's presentation tonight and Scott's facilitation of the conversation, we will be holding another series of our popular community conversations. These online meetings will be on June 14th and June 15th. June 14th is at noon Eastern time. June 15th is at 8 p.m. Eastern time. At these conversations, you will have an opportunity to learn more about the strategic direction of RISE's grants programs, including both our featured grants and transformation partnerships. And you will get an update on the improvements we are making to our featured grants internal processes. Please sign up to attend one of these conversations. On June 20th, we will host the Together Women Rise Advocacy Group with results. That's our monthly webinar with results. Please register today. And we have a full calendar of events for our 20th anniversary. Please visit our website for all of the dates and details. And I'm going to plug the Chicago event because I'm working on that one. It will be Saturday, September 20th, or excuse me, Saturday, September 30th in Chicago. A lot of fun things planned around our anniversary. And then our next monthly webinar will be after the 4th of July. It'll be on Thursday, July 6th at 8 p.m. Eastern time, 5 p.m. Pacific time. And we hope to see you then. And you can find all of this information on our website under the upcoming events, under the Join Us tab, and then upcoming events. So under that tab, you'll learn more, be able to register for the events. And somebody was asking about recordings. This tonight was recorded, and our previous future grantees have also, these webinars are also recorded, and you can find them there. So thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you so much to our grantees for participating tonight and helping to educate us, and wish everybody a great rest of the month and hope to see you in July. Thank you and good night.